Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee with Al and Dave. It's my compadre Dave. How you doing, Dave?
I'm good, Alan. I'm good.
Alrighty. We have a really you always sound like like I'm doing fine. I have my coffee. Leave me alone. I just got up 20 minutes ago. Oh God. We have a really good
It takes
show
a few
today.
cups, before I can almost be jazzy.
Yeah, this is three for me already on the day. Gonna kill me one of these days. Um anyway, we have a really good show today. Today we're not talking about anybody. Well, we are. We're not. We are. We're not talking about me. Is what we're doing. Um, we're talking about synergistics research. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, he's gonna bash them. He's gonna this. No, 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 no. I think we did this pretty good, didn't we? We
Yeah.
just we looked at it for what it was, and we just every single day comparing notes to kind of like graph out how the changes go and occur. The first thing I want to say though is we like to wish our friend Ted Daney over at Synergistics a speedy recovery. He had a motorcycle accident and he was in the ICU for a while over at Vanderbilt, and they just released him the other day. So we want to wish him a speedy recovery. Um, and let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Oh, one other thing before we jump into this, because we like to talk about CDs and albums and all that stuff. Is anyone familiar with the Audiophile Society, which is basically David Chesky's new setup, right? So if you want to go and get any type of mixes that Dave's work on, you go over there, or now he's selling his son's speakers, and so it's going to be like a one shop deal, anything Chesky. Well, they just started with his daughter Paloma's memory album. You can now buy it on CD. It's He's doing a reference gold CD for basically $30. It's 29.98. They're doing a an LP, which should be roughly the same price. Right now, I'm taking a look at the website, and that's the price of the LP. That's Dave, babe. You got to change that price. That's really screwed up. Um, but you're also doing you can get a quarter-inch reference master tape. Now, these master tapes are, you know, Rhino's $300. Chad's $500. The other ones up. These are going for 560. I don't know. I'm a quarter-inch guy. I love tape. I just don't think we should be spending $500 for. I just That's ridiculous. But you can get one. I'm not knocking it because they do nice work, and I'm sure it's going to be a stellar product. I'm not spending $560 for it. So that's that. Oh, let's see what else in the crazy news. What else was in the news this week? There was something else besides Democrats. Did you hear
Um.
the Democrats are raising their insurance again for business licenses?
Uh-oh.
Uh, They're passing a bill. I don't know if it passed yesterday or they're putting it up for a vote today. It's basically the crime of necessity bill. So if you need to go and rob so and so, it's okay. We'll just
Mm.
dump it on the insurance companies, which business insurance is pooled across the United States. It's kind of like homeowners insurance, right? So you say, well, why did my homeowners policy go up? Well, because California has no forest management, right? So your homeowners policies go up. Why did my business license go up? Because now it's okay to rob if you say it's a necessity. Isn't that great?
Oh, jeez.
Oh God,
Uh-oh.
fucking California. Anyway, getting back now, you know why everybody's leaving California and all the businesses. No, there was somebody else in the news this week that went out of business again.
Oh, jeez.
Was it MIT? Did we talk about MIT last week, or was it this
Yeah,
week?
you mentioned that last week.
Yeah, it just it's crazy what's going on in the industry. But anyway, getting back to this, you have to understand when it comes to synergistic stuff, right? I've been involved with synergistics since the beginning. I had an AC master coupler, and then I went to a reference coupler, and always a power guy. So reference coupler took me to the X series. The X series took me to the designer reference, to absolute reference, to Tesla. the hologram. Hang on, Galileo and Euphoria, which is where I stopped. Only because when you start getting in $5,000 chords, that's getting a bit ridiculous. Um, but I have been playing with their stuff for a very long time. I have their external DC biasing power supplies, all that fun stuff. So I'm very familiar with the house sound of Synergistics, and I would be the first to tell you that if you're looking at a power situation and you buy 5 power chords, please make sure they're not all the same model, because when you put all the same model in, Synergistics gets one really tight, you know, harmonic signature. If you want a more neutral character with Synergistics, you put in different power chords and you never place the same chord in series. And that's kind of the way I've always done it, and it's always worked pretty good for me. Um, and as we're discovering, the fuses kind of work the same way. First, I want to give a shout out to Alfred Krantz. Everybody knows Al. Al's, who I went and got the fuses from. He didn't send them to me for free, so it's not like I'm being paid to do this or anything. I paid out of pocket for this stuff. And what Al went and did is he was able to score me um, some pink fuses, which he's got at, I think, 20 or 30% off for right now. And he was able to score me the holographic fuse before the rest of you were able to get the holographic fuse, which I thought was really nice of him. Um, and I've been using a very single test album, which is Mr. Donald Fagen. This here is the Geffen Gold Promo. There's only 100 of these in existence. This backstory to this, Dave, is that when they were getting ready to release this album for Fagen, Geffen was throwing a private party, and the album wasn't quite ready for release yet. So he just went over to the studio, said, "Make me up 100 CDs." They went back and they used the master tape instead of Fagen's EQ tape, which is really thin sounding. And this album is probably the best version of it. It's warm, it's seductive, it's airy, it's burnish. It's got and it's even got a slightly different mix of the songs too. There's some longer versions of songs on this album that don't exist on the actual release. So it's kind of cool, and it's always my go-to when I listen to it. And I've been listening to it every single day during this process. Now, getting back to the fuses, just really quick. The fuses are just like the power chords. You want to layer the synergistic sound. So where my fuse is more of a universal, right? You can put pop EVO into everything and it just compounds. Synergistics, on the other hand, is more like a building block. So if you want thinner edge sound, you use this one particular and you put it in this one particular spot. If you want a more warmish, transparent, billowy type of softer, relay sound, you use this other model and you put it in this spot, this spot, and this spot. And it's kind of like that. So first and foremost, how did I set it up? Let's just use the JBL system because that's what you and I kind of referenced all week. As everybody knows, in there I use Richard Gray's, and I use a lot of Synergistics. It's kind of like my hand-me-down Synergistics power chords, but they're all upscale for their time. And I have the transporter in there. So all of the Richard Gray received the pink fuse. The MyTech DAC got the master fuse, as recommended by Synergistics. And then the Prima Luna got the holographic fuse. All my other pieces don't take it. Oh, I'm sorry. And the transporter got the pink fuse for all three. Initial description is pink is more pinpointish. It's 3-dimensional, but it's not as 3-dimensional as the holographic fuse. And I just a quick reference. The first night that we did it, I was describing to T2, right, where I'm watching on the not T2, the Avengers. I'm watching on the screen. Here's Sam Jackson and we pan, right, and you have the other character actors on the screen there, and you could pinpoint the image, you know, hard right. And not only can you pinpoint it, they were 5 6 feet off the ground pinpointing it, which was kind of cool, especially for a system that doesn't have surround speakers, and it was pretty cool. So the problem that I'm starting to experience with the Pink Fuse is that I think I've put too many in series. You know what I mean? I got them on the power supply. I got them on this. I got them on that, and I'm getting a little bit of a leading edge hardness in the upper mids, and it's not where it's bothering vocals as much because you heard last night the vocals were nice and smooth. It's um it's more like the sharp attacks, and it's the JBL horns is really what it is, right? They're just going. It's one of those types of, and that can be kind of ear bleeding with those horns. But it's not. If you listen to it downstairs, it doesn't have that same. It's just dedicated to the JBLs. So we'll be fixing that in a bit. But anyway, the pink fuses on all of the power setups is giving you this gorgeous pinpoint imaging across the stage. It does give you a little bit of a billow, but it's more of a depth of billow than it is a front, right? So your spatial is going behind the speaker and so forth, and it's not coming this way. Where the holographic fuse, on the other hand, and like I was telling Dave the other day, I have the holographic in the Prima Luna EVO 400 preamp, and the issue with that is that obviously I'm not running my tubes 10 days, 24/7 to break this thing in, and I'm flipping it on, flipping it off, and it takes 6 or 7 hours before it even becomes listenable. When it does, you're getting a nice three-dimensional wraparound. I find it to be a more forward sound. So yes, you can still hear stuff behind the speaker, but it's more from the speaker edge forward is a good way to describe it. So if you're looking for a more wraparound sound, this is not a bad way to go. So it'll be interesting if it can reproduce what we heard night one in another week or so. Night one was just insanely good. But we'll have to say the JBL horns are really hard. These are touring horns, so I don't know if anybody knows what a line array speaker is, but if you ever go to a concert and you look at a concert stage, the speakers that are hanging down are line arrays, and these are the SR 835s, which they don't make them anymore. But the drivers that were used in the 835s eventually became the JBL M2s, just a different cabinet, and they're fantastic, but they absolutely have to be EQ'd. And if you know anything about JBL touring gear, it's really designed to be graphic with the DBX, and DBX even has a presets on the inside and so forth to give us something to work with. So I'm not really using EQ in this room, so it's mostly room treatments, and we're using the electrical as the EQ path, which is a little harder to do, but it's that's the joy of the tweak, right? That's the ride to get there at the end of the day. And once you hear what it can sound like, that first night was really killer. I mean, once you hear fuck, I can actually get there. I didn't think I could get that type of sound out of that speaker. I thought it was always going to give me this hard edge, and unless I put EQ in, which I really didn't want to do, or I had to switch the tubes in the preamp, which I was kind of hesitant on because NOS tubes these days, it's like, let's see, do I want to spend $800, $900 for 6 tubes, or and that's really what the cost is going to run you. And the problem with the Prima Lunas is that a lot of the reissued tubes they chew them up. They just don't like them as much, and you wind up using tubes that have a little stronger of a heater on the inside so they can handle it. So I haven't put anything in them yet that's a reissue. Besides those tongue soles, I'm still using the tongue soles in the other one. They're great, but in this preamp here, if it ain't NOS, it chews them right up. It doesn't matter what the what new sector name they stamp on the glass.
Mm.
So
Well, I couldn't believe those. The video you sent me was those JBLs. I
last
thought,
night,
wow.
well, that's
Yeah,
something.
yeah, the other night, yeah, I thought, wow, this is because, like you said, they have that certain character. It's bright on the top, just by design. They're made to get
Right,
loud, but when you get
right.
them dialed in, they're a great sounding speaker. And a lot of audiophiles would go, "Oh, that kind of speaker. Oh, no way." But they
Well, yeah.
also
Listen,
forget the JBLs from the past, the vintage JBLs that are great sounding, nice
yeah.
and warm, and
These are not like DJ JBLs that you can buy a grand a speaker. These cost almost $10,000 each. Before they were taken out. So this is not a cheap setup. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I bought these, and then I think it was like 6 or 8 months later, the M2s came out. And if I would have known they came out with the M2, I would have bought that, instead
right.
of, but same price. But I've been nothing but pleased with these. Once, like I said, once you get over that edge, it's a fun thing. That's why I'm kind of looking forward to the next thing I got coming in. I don't want to say nothing about it, but it's something that you're able to clip on the speaker cable and change the ringing harmonic signature of the cable. So we're going to see if that kind of does something for the speaker. Or we'll figure it out. Be interesting.
Nice.
But I've been really impressed with the fuses so far and what they're able to do. It's just the sound quality has been it's just that roller coaster ride day in and day every single day. Like last night it was gorgeous. This morning it almost sounded like somebody slipped my ear with a razor blade. It was painful to listen to, and you know there was just no bass. It was almost like it kicked in around 240 on up, and but it had a rolled off top end too, so you're not getting any air, and it's just that mid range push. And it's just, but it'll get there eventually. That's the UEF thing. I'll never forget the first time I put one of the products in it. It was the Power Cell one. It's just something that goes. It's an inline filter, right? It's got a built-in power supply, and I plugged that in on one of my cables, and usually synergistics cords are done within 100 hours, and I plugged this thing on, and 100 hours, and it sounds awful. Now I'm 7 days. I'm 8 days. It took 13 days. It took this thing to finally stop the roller coaster ride. It got to like 9, and then it started to refine it in. And ever since that, it don't matter if it's the plug-in I gave you or anything. They all take this length of time to settle down for whatever reason. So we'll just have to wait it out and see. It's got another 7 days to see if she settles down. But
So Alan, when you started this, did you just start out with one fuse with one component, and then you kind of started adding to see what
I
happened, or
added
you
them
just kind
through
of
a
went?
period of 3 days. So I already had the master fuses on hand, sitting in a drawer. So I went and I popped them into the Mytex in both rooms because that was Synergistics' recommendation, and they weren't bad. They were just as thin as I remember them sounding, but they weren't bad. Then I got the order in from Al, and I started with the Richard Gray on this side, and within 2 hours of putting them in, I was able to kind of see where the sound was going to go. It already got warm and plump and thicker, And then from there, the following day, I put the holograph fuses in both rooms. So I did them in stages, right? So I did the masters on Monday. I did pink on Tuesday, in both rooms, and then on Wednesday I did the holographic. As also doing downstairs as well. So that's the other thing that you understand is this is on all three systems. So in my house, you know how like a power cord has multiple ringing nodes, right? You have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Well, so does my streaming system. So everything starts in the studio, and then it goes to the theater, okay, as a hub and a distro, and then it goes downstairs for the final playback. So you're on two electrical panels and three different circuits. So it's you have to kind of design the system like a beginning, a middle, and an end, while still giving each room its own individual character as you're just dedicating your time in that space. So like if I'm in the studio, I don't want the studio. I want the studio to sound like I want it to sound, but at the same time, I want that signature to be able to translate to something else downstairs. That kind of makes sense to you?
Yeah.
And that's it's a harder trick to do. It takes a lot longer to do that because what works here doesn't always work over there. And but it's a learning curve. Once you know what you have to do to A, B, C. Like I'll give you an example. In each room, I have one of Bill's EAU4s plugged in at the wall, right? And for two of the rooms, that's all I have plugged in. That's all I need. The Richard Gray system over here is a pain in the ass, right? Because it's it's not what you consider an audiophile power conditioner. It's just a choke, so you're just doing impedance stiffness of the line instead of harmonic signature, manipulation, all that stuff that you would get with a capacitor or something like that plugged in. And so this is where all of those wonderful plug-in filters start to take over, right? So, what was it? Saturday evening or Friday night or Saturday night. I'm sitting in the room over at the JBLs, and the sound was so forward. I'm trying to think, how can I, I'm praying to God this is not the final thing, because it was on a night that should have made the synergistics sound really good, right? Really warm and seductive, and I wasn't getting that. It was very forward and hard sounding, and so I just start plugging stuff in. I go and I grab those Q waves, which I'm not a big fan of, and I rearrange the way I have things plugged into the 1200, and I plug a pair of the Q waves in, and all of a sudden, my thick and nice organic, that Bill sound just kind of like goes away, and the sound system does like one of these types of moves. It comes back, but you know it's the first time I ever plugged any of those types of filters in and heard it immediately. That kind of reaction. So it was kind of neat. I mean, it wasn't like I had to wait 20 minutes to experience it. I literally heard the widening happening within 30 seconds of plugging them in, and then,
Wow.
I thinned out the bottom end and all that stuff. We just hit that that harmonic. We went from shit, and you're trying to manipulate the shitty harmonic, and I think that's why I heard it so well. But I popped that in, and eventually the signature came back to the center, but now it was down and on the same plane as the speaker instead of floating up top. Like So anyway, I said, okay, let's. I have the 400 back there in parallel. Let's just try one of the other ones. So I popped the Q sign in, which is not one of my favorites because it freaks the video up. And over 20 minutes, I hear a sharpening, which makes the JBLs more sharp. So it's bright forward and ear bleeding. But I know that warms up at 4 days. So do I leave it in? Do I not leave it in? Let's grab the coil, plug it in. That tamed it a little bit. So it was bearable. But what it went and did was it took this stage that was, like I said, in your face, and it started to bring it back to the speaker plane, put it over here, and now I'm hearing very distinct sounds all over the place. So it kind of reminded me of like a Dolby Atmos demo, where ping, 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 and it sounded pretty good. It just didn't stay there, and that got worse as the next morning rolled around. So me, I yanked everything out, and I said, okay, let's. let's try plugging the synergistics filters in. Maybe they may be the answer I'm looking for. It makes sense. Fuses, cables, right? Oh no. They just had such an adverse effect with the chokes that it was absolutely unlistenable. It went from, you know, hard sound went right into smothered sound. And then it got really gritty as time went on. So that had to come out. So then I go back to the Nordis stuff in there, and I said, well, let me try something. Maybe Nordis is always about you plug two of these in and one coil, two of these in and the other coil. Maybe the EAU4 I have at the wall is being canceled out by the Synergistics power cord, right, with the DC biasing. So I'm going to grab a pair of Bill's filters, the twos, and plug that into the 400 along with the other stuff. That was it. Took care of it. So now it's all locked in, nice and good and harmonic. It allowed me to extend that out to the isolation transformers. So far, everything sounds pretty darn good. Whereas I didn't need to repeat that in the studio or downstairs. So it was just exclusive to the Richard Gray stuff. I still haven't tweaked it downstairs.
Oh wow.
I mean, I put the fuses in, yeah, but I don't have any other filtering. That audio hungry filter is just insanely good.
Wow.
It just grips everything, and nothing gets through. I mean, unless you got a light switch. What is up with that? I have two fan light switches on separate circuits, no less. Right, every time they go on and off. Obviously, to tune an arc. Arc's got to go back to the main panel and then up to the thing, and all I hear is snap, snap. I've tried everything to get rid of it. I've done all the usual stuff where you put caps in line and so forth. Can't get rid of it.
Wow.
Don't know why.
Hmm.
And it's only been since Ka-chunk with the electrical. So I don't know what the hell happened.
Gosh. Well, you were talking about when you tweak one system. I've had that happen too, where you get it sounding good, but then somewhere
Doesn't
else
translate
something
somewhere
happened.
else.
Yeah, right. Or you had somewhere else dialed in, and I've heard multiple times when you've been like, "Hey, it's the system's sounding good," but then your video gets messed up.
And that's the thing with the theater setup is that I have all these things plugged in, which is you look at it and go, how many things you got plugged? I got quite a bit plugged in. Let's see. 4, 5, 6 into the main, 1 in the wall, so that's 7. 10, so I got 3 in the one and then 3 in the other, so 13. 13 plug-in filters going into just this one setup. If you listen to it downstairs, it sounds spectacular. Everything is fleshed in, it's dynamic, it's it's not, I wouldn't say it's three-dimensional where it can fill the whole space, but the atoms never filled the whole space, right? Whereas, that's the difference really going from the atoms to the focal, tweeter. You'll get a much brighter presentation. But the video is just, it's gorgeous. It's I use these test patterns off of YouTube, which are they're 8K, but I'm just sampling them back to 1080p, right, to match the video card. And you would swear, when you're looking at these, that you were looking at 8K video. It's hard to describe. It's all these landscape scenes, right? So you have the water and you have the rock form and all this stuff. But you can literally see the granulars in the rock formation as the camera's panning past it. You get edge definition, in your video. It's neat to watch. And you're getting that translation downstairs, which is great. I'm getting the video side translation in the theater as well on the Sony, but again, you're still dealing with that hard edge of the JBL. So, like I said, I'm hoping that the fuses tame down a bit more over the next 7 days. And if not, maybe these things I have coming in, which we'll talk about in a couple of weeks, um, will take care of the fire. Who knows? We'll see. You never know with this type of stuff. Everything's going to be something different. But that system here, I had to really take it to the extreme with all those plugins. And again, it's not the fuses that you're fighting with. The fuses are, you can hear them trying to smooth certain areas out. But you're getting, because the JBLs are not EQ'd, you're getting some dips in certain areas, and you're using these plugins as a way to fill in those dips. And it's just the cross points on the horns. But we'll get there.
Now, you mentioned that to me the other day. Is that what happened after a certain time period where the video really started to pop?
Um, there's been 3 listening and viewing sessions during this last week. The first one was fuse only. I saw a video pop the first evening, the moment that I had all 3 systems fused. The video performance was, I mean, just outstanding for streaming video. Not like I've ever seen that way. Off the hard drives, it looked good as it always does, even though it had a little bit more sharper definition, but at the expense of a little ringing distortion around the image, that white halo. And you still got the white halo too because of the streaming video. But it almost looked like somebody took the sharpness where I usually keep it. I don't know, where do we keep the sharpness? Like around 30%. Um, it was almost like you moved it up to 80%. It's that extreme of a difference, and it stayed that way for the entire time until I started mucking around with how I had things plugged in and so forth. But now I seem to have the harmonic value right back to where I had it before, even though I'm getting more pop off of this system. Um, and it's back to 80% again, and so I'm going to have to absolutely turn the sharpness down, but not enough that you blur the depth of the image. It's tough. That's the hardest thing when you're doing this type of stuff, is that you want to do it for sound quality, but sound and video have different frequencies that they're adjusted by, right? Sound, you can, power wise, we can manipulate it as low as 30 hertz, and then just put an overtone in 3069, that type of deal. Video, on the other hand, has just such a small range between 1 megahertz and 10 megahertz, and if you put too much in that range, you'll get over enhancement and ringing distortion. Okay, and it's because you are literally boosting the frequency range to the point where the circuitry inside the television is saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you're giving us way too much." Or on the other hand, you get a blurry image, and you're saying, "Hey, wait a minute, you're not giving us you're not giving us the right amount." So it's kind of it's a balancing act. But again, sound and video don't balance itself, and that's just analog. Digital, on the other hand, digital circuitry is generally around 2.8, 2.5 gigahertz, because that's where the processors are located at. And if you give the processor too much, you sit back and say, "Oh my God, the hyper detail coming off of it." Yes, but in reality, is you're really giving the processor too much of a specific frequency, causing it to clip. And that clipping is your hyper detail and your rolled off and thinned out bass. Whereas if you do the opposite, and you kind of like put a dip into that range, you might hear more bass on the processor, but you'll have a rolled off top end. So you're always trying to get that common balance. It's no different than a tube, right? If I have a tube, and this tube is designed for 6.3, and it's got a balance, plus and minus on the triodes. You put it in, it has more of a neutral sound character to it. On the other hand, if one of the sides of the tubes are slightly off from the other, or the heater is slightly off, you get more of a dip on your voltage, and you get a warmer sounding tube. Okay, whereas if you're overshooting it, you get a brighter sounding tube. Take your pick. Everything has that kind of character as you're tuning it, and the fuses are no different because the synergistic fuses require you to layer in the harmonic sound. Like I said, the master is thin and dynamic, but now you have to take that and color that in. You have to give it flesh, right? The master is the bones of the system. The pink before it is giving you some pinpoint, so the two are popping off of each other, which is giving you that more of a dynamic punch on the base, punching you in the chest. But everything else, the skin, the color of your skin, that is still missing from the presentation. You have to put some color into it. And I know audiophiles, they all say, I don't want no colored sound. What the hell do you think you're shopping for every time you buy something? I bought this one because why? It made my system sing. I put this chord on there. Why? Because it made my system sing. Well, that's color. And you're doing the same exact thing. So as I'm layering the power chords and never use the same chord twice in order to get that kind of signature, you do the same exact thing with the fuse. And so far, I've been very pleased. If you heard what we were listening to last night, I mean, and understand this is not, Donald Fagen's album. I wouldn't say it's a thick album, whatsoever, right? It's a pretty thin. Even the gold one's kind of thin, and it was just light and airy and detailed and delicate in a lot of areas. And the vocals, they were nice in comparison to what we were listening to the other day. Remember the other day, we were listening to female vocals the other day, and she was so spitty, and it wasn't like it was just spitty enough to be annoying, right? It was one of these, on top of the microphone type of deal, which it's not there in that vocal. In that vocal, it's nice and full and round and so forth, and it just didn't sound that way. And 2 days later, it sounded great, but you have to go through this roller coaster. But downstairs, I've been very pleased with the sound quality. Not enough not to buy a new pair of speakers, but I've been pretty happy with it.
So those focals may be on the horizon.
Oh, those focals are on the horizon. We're looking at October. Yeah, those focals are on the horizon.
Nice.
I'm not going with the
Wow.
trios. I just don't think they'll work in the spot as much as the other ones. And it's not it's like I said, it's not a money thing because I'm just going to put them on layaway, but
Right.
easy pay. But what difference does it make if I pay them off in 5 months or 6 months?
Right.
But
At
I
least
think the
feels
way that
nicer,
the
right?
way that the tweeter, where the placement of the tweeter for that space is going to work better in the center versus you know on the side there and up against that inside wall. You know what I'm saying with the fireplace. Um, one side of the room is we can deal with it pretty easily because you have an opening that goes into another room. But on the left hand side, it's pretty much a box. The way that they did it. Nobody expected them to push the cabinets that far back when they put them in, but they had to. Anyway, but so the speaker plane is about, I don't know, 8 inches, 9 inches back, somewhere like that. And then we have this wall that has the fireplace that pushes forward, and you wind up getting this box-like sound in the center. So if the tweeter's over here, it's like I was trying to explain to Jen. I said, she kept saying to me, she was watching YouTube videos, and she says, I like the depth, the bottom end of the trios. She was going to go for it. So I said, yeah. I said, well, understand those first and foremost, the speakers are in the middle of the room. They're not being reinforced by the thing, and so forth. She says, but I really like the sound. And I said, well, let me explain to you how the focal tweeter works. It's like a suction cup, right? And unlike a normal tweeter where sound fires like this, a focal tweeter, since it has this kind of curvature to the M tweeter, the sound kind of comes off of it like this. It's why it has such a wide image. And the last thing you want that image to do is hit a wall. Okay, and if it has to hit the wall, I want to make sure it goes into the Venetian blinds that are flexible to absorb the frequency instead of hitting a wall surface where it's going to ring somewhere else. So I think their twins are a better way to go. But anyway, that's a couple months from now. Anything can change. You never know. I may do something with the system and go, I don't need to. You know, I'll tweak something, and but right now I got to tweak it. I got to. It's just the problem with the atom tweeters is they're 17 years old and they're drying out.
Ah,
And it's I started to notice it about 3 years ago where it went from smooth to only a little bit on the consonants, and then now it's and I just can't stand it. It drives me crazy.
yeah. Do you hear it on cymbals too?
Um, I can it depends on if the DB is clipping the DAC. If the DB clips the DAC, I absolutely can hear it on cymbals. But if not, no, I still have that brass kind of sound quality to it. It's just vocal. I mean the the cross on them is at 3. And it's down 6 at 3K already, and it's just right where it is. It's not bright enough of a tweeter in order to kind of fill that gap in. It'd be different if it had a mid range driver. It would fill the gap in, but it doesn't. It's a 2.5 speaker instead of a 3. So, anywho, but where else are we at?
Now, talking about fuses, I wanted to say that it's one of those things that people would think would be total snake oil, right?
Some of them are. Some of them
Yeah, like you mentioned that one brand they're like 2,000 plus per fuse,
are. That's
something like
insane,
that.
isn't it?
It's crazy. Yeah,
I mean, I've seen a lot of the dealerships in the U.S. selling those, and you say, "Are you actually selling them?" For every $2,000 fuse, what do you sell? One of them? What do you sell? 350 of them, and I can't imagine the latter. It's I put out a filter, and let's say I put a $300 price tag on it. I can't get anybody to buy. I take the same filter, and I drop it $100, and they sell like a rocket ship. You have that psychological threshold of pricing where things will sell. Like the biggest problem we're having now is we did the roll back the prices thing for our catalog, and people are saying to me, "Are they as good as the other ones?" Well, they're better than the other ones. The only difference in prices is that I cut out a lot of what I make off of it, number one, but number two, I cut a deal with a lot of my vendors, so I'm buying much larger quantity of parts, so in order to bring the price down. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like when I started doing this, oh God, 98. I think I used to pay $1.25 a plug-in case, and then when I started to release them to the audiophile community, I was paying $3, 350, whatever a case. Now I just bought cases Sunday night. It cost me $7.80 a case in a large lot. It's. I mean, if I would have bought a single, it cost me $9. I mean, it's crazy these days, and it's really hard to roll the price back because of that. It's like the parts on the inside of the EVO1, right? They didn't go down in price. I was able to hold back the price a little bit. So instead of me spending, $38 for one, and there's multiple in the thing, um, I was able to bring it down to like spending $36 for one. So it's almost like I was buying, instead of buying 25 of it, I got the 50 price instead. One of those type of deals. But it's hard. So now we have to figure out what the psychology is going to be for that type of stuff. But no, is there any difference in the EVO blocker today versus Yeah, last year, no, it's the same filter. I just figured out a different way to fabricate it in order to lower the costs. Same thing with everything else, and I gave you a little bit more choice in it too, right? So doing two things. One is I want people to stop asking me, well, if I buy this insert, what's it going to be the difference from that insert versus this other one that I already own? One insert to rule them all. If you don't like one side, flip it over to the other side, right? And call it a day. Um, it's the same thing with the fuses. What model fuse should I buy? Well, now I have all my latest tech that I was charging you $350 for, all now built into this one fuse that we're doing for less than $100. Install it, compound it. I mean, in my mind, I'm thinking you're installing 2 to 3 in series. So if that's your type of system, your source, your pre, and your amp, it's going to sing. Even if you only put two in your system, because you have two in series, it's going to sing. So now somebody's going to say, if I only got one in there, if you only got one in there, you're going to get the basic outline. It's no different than plugging in the master fuse. You have the bones of the system. Now you have to color it in somehow. If you can't put a second fuse in, maybe you plug an EVO1 in, right? Just like in this system here. I had it, it was a little forward. I grabbed another pair of Bill's filters, I plugged them in, and voila, it gave me just enough of the mid range coloration that it fleshed it in for me. I mean, that's all the whole art of tweaking. Fuses are tweaking. Just have to figure out how to layer your signature.
Yeah, and I would say the first time I heard one that was tweaked, I was shocked. And
Was that a fuse?
yeah, and I'd heard the synergistics. I think you shared that one with me. It was in the benchmark, the
Yeah, the
DAC.
black ones. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was
uh,
a nice match with that DAC.
yeah, right. I used the black one in this one. It gives
And
you know
then
it because the power supply is so small in these boxes. You don't get any inductance really off the core in order to give yourself any warmth or base power. So adding the graphene in there, it just gives you a little bit more of an inductance boost on the front end. And once again, it adds a little bit of that voltage lag in there, and you wind up getting a warmer sound quality. You know,
and when I listened to that one, um, I just thought that's crazy that a fuse can make that difference. And then the big thing is to go, one to the other, obviously, but even just go back to stock fuses and hear the difference.
well,
It was like,
what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to fuses is that you think that your fuse is actually filtering for you. That they're not. No matter how I hype it or Ted hypes it or whoever, they're not filtering. What they're really doing is that they're changing thermal temperature. One of the things I was telling Dave was that one of my components downstairs, they double fused it, and I said, "Oh my goodness." I hope they don't think I mean, luckily we're on 120 power, but it's rarity that you see it. A lot of times, if you see two fuses in there, one's a spare. No, they double fused it, thinking that this was always going to be installed in a balanced circuit. You know, and they did the same thing with the filter. The filter, who should be named. Anyway, we couldn't figure out why a 2300-watt component only had a 10 amp fuse in it. Well, when you pull it out, you find out it's got two 10 amp fuses in it. So it was designed, So I just slapped the 16 in there just because I had one. But, that's the way it is. But yeah, the fuses themselves are not filtering in the way that you think. You get a little bit of the dampening from the lacquer, that's holding all this stuff together. And you get a little, don't get me wrong, synergistics in their label. Okay, the label's just not paper. It's got a little bit of metallic in there, just like mine uses copper. Okay, so you get a little bit of a reflection wave in there as well from that. But the rest of it, when you look at the coating itself, that little tiny dot that's on the fuse, that's adjusting the thermal temperature of the energy passing through the fuse. I mean, you could never put that on the inside of the fuse because you never get the fuse to pop. There's a company that paints the inside of the fuses, and that's God forbid you actually ever have a surge because it'll never blow.
Mm.
You just the coatings, when you start dealing with these copper and graphene based coatings, like we all do, they become an electrical pathway. So you absolutely can only treat the outside of the fuse. So be careful when you see a lot of these companies. There's a company that sells. I used to sell gold plated copper outlets, and this other company sold the same exact model and actually got it from the same place that I did. Except what they would do on the inside is they pull the outlet apart and they would paint the inside of the plastic shell. And the problem is that if that paint ever flakes, and it will flake eventually, um, you can't always sit back and say, well, because of this type of environment. If you live in an area like Dave and I do, where you get really high humidity levels, a good portion of the year, yeah, absolutely, that stuff's going to flake. You know, or if you live in an area where you have salt crud, absolutely, that stuff's going to flake. So the moment that does, that flaking becomes, an electrical pathway. That's a good way to get hurt. So you can't do that kind of stuff. So everything's got to be external. But again, you're just changing the thermal temperature, and a lot of times we're able to either add resistance into it, or we can actually increase, the voltage going through it. A lot of times, if we're using a graphene in the mix somewhere, we're increasing the voltage. That's that extra warmth that you hear. So, just it's not rocket science, even though we all make it out to be. But it's a neat way to go and change things. And a lot of times too is that I know with my own stuff, and I'm sure Synergistics does the same thing. That when you get the thermal temperature reached, right? This is what the break-in period is. You can't break a fuse in. Let's talk sense. It's two solder joints and a piece of wire. But when you get the thermal temperature to finally stabilize, okay, and it really depends on how much you're trying to how much voltage current that your component requires. Um, Eventually, what happens is that lower frequency starts to bleed from your power, from your transformer into your circuitries. And the roller coaster ride that you hear is your EL caps going, we don't like this frequency. We don't like this frequency. But eventually, the capacitor, it will stabilize. And then it will move on to your chips. And then your chips will stabilize. And then it moves on to your cables. But the idea is that, especially with the carbons, is that it eventually it reaches a certain temperature on the inside where it starts producing like a negative ionic interaction. Now, the little tiny dots that we use on a fuse don't produce a lot of negative ions. It's not like taking a negative ion generator and pointing it at a power supply, and 10 seconds later you have now flooded it. It takes days and weeks, and in order for this little tiny patch to actually fill the area up. And then what happens on top of that is that every time that EM comes off the power supply, it cancels out the negative ionic field. So you're always caught in this catch 22. But it does work. Once you reach 3 weeks, 4 weeks in, it does work until you turn the component off. And the moment you do that, the cycle, just like with the Prima Luna, it starts all over again. So these things are not meant to be in circuits where they're flipped off. Now, I said something last week about you're able to get away with certain things when it comes to putting fuses in. Depends on how they're implemented in the component. So If you look at the back end, you have an IEC and a fuse holder built into the IEC, then just having the power cord plugged in will give you just enough energy to stimulate the fuse. So it rings back through the power cord and so forth. It takes a lot longer, but it does that. On the other hand, if the fuse comes after the hard switch, and let's say the hard switch doesn't provide a standby mode, then you'll never break it in. But you'll never break your power cord in. You'll never break your interconnects in. That's just, unless this is, you plug these things on, turn them on 24/7.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
how
When
does
I've heard when I've heard them in certain cases, it was like a full on component change, like similar.
it can be right?
Yeah, in certain cases, it's like wow, it's hard to believe actually.
It's like taking a CD player that maybe is slightly on the thinner sound. You go, let me get a thicker sounding power cord, right? So I'll grab a Cardis because we already know what Cardis signature sounds like. You pop it on, you go, oh my god, it's like a brand new piece, right? You darkened it so much that you brought in all these different, these lower frequency tonal characters in the lower mids, but then sometimes you also lose the trail ends, right? It comes in too dark. But yes, they can sound like a component change completely. It just depends on how you implement them. What else you
And
got?
and in that case, like you were talking about the tuning with your recent fuse experiments, um, with certain other fuses, is it do you end up getting too much of a good thing if you combine them, or can you keep it kind of balanced and then you're just
Well,
actually get a
I'll give you.
compounding good effect that's positive that you go, oh wow, yeah, this is
I
still
think it
good.
really depends on what you're trying to apply them to, right? If you're looking at a component where it's let's say today's dollars, let's say it's under $1,500. So you know that it's got a dinky power supply in it and stuff like that, and you know that it's a thin sounding component. You could absolutely put a single value in, right? Let's say pink, right? Just for example, and every single component you could put a pink fuse in. There would be no reason to say, well, let me try to get a leading edge definition or whatever by playing games with it. So in that case, there you can actually improve the overall sound quality just by locking in one single signature. So different than sitting back saying, well, every when power chords first started out, every component gets an AC master coupler. Well, that was true to a degree, and then as you started to notice, the first one rolled the top end off just right. The second one, oh yes, it got bigger and bolder. But by the time I got to the third one and the fourth one, if you had that kind of elaborate system, you had no top end. So now you say, okay, well, I got to buy interconnects that have more of a top end in. So everything's silver, right? To get a silver sound. Well, now I went to silver. I got to bring it back just a little bit, but back then we didn't make one pair of speaker cables. We made two. We made highs and lows. Yeah, so it all depends on how you do it. But you can absolutely take a less expensive system, or like we were talking about last week with the focals, and it's just that final tweak, right? It allows you to plug a fuse in. It's that final tweak to tweak the output of your room. Okay, this is the voice of your room. This is the echo chamber, which is the room. So as long as that fuse, complements the echo chamber, it's going to be a great sounding system. Won't know until you try it.
So there is trial and error with that too. You
Oh,
got
it's
to
absolute
tweak.
trial
You
and
got to
error.
tweak.
Everything. Yeah, everything. I'm like I told you, I was sitting up here the other night just plugging in, plugging in, plugging, and I could tell within 20 minutes. Oh, I didn't like this. So yeah, it's depends. Like right now, I had everything yesterday great, and I got an idea last night. I said, "Well, we go put those synergistic Ethernet plugins back in to the network." I don't know what it's doing for me until I sit downstairs and see it streams across all three. But I have let's see, I got five of them plugged in between the two rooms. We'll see what that does. Most likely, I'll come back later on. I'll yank them all out. Why? Because the video looked fantastic before I put them in. So, what you have to say?
Yeah. But you just had to keep
I had to
tweaking,
go. I had to go
Alan.
that
You
final
had
mile. It depends. Like if I'm
uh,
looking, when you first plug them in, and you're looking at streaming video, the video gets more saturated. The colors pop. You get more sharpness in your image, depth depth of field, and then 10, 15 hours later it starts to wash out. Now in a good setup, it won't wash out, but in a bad one it will. And when people, everyone says, well, you can't possibly, you plug these things in, and you apparently just do not understand how the Ethernet, the LAN, works. And yes, I do know how it works. This is not affecting the signal running through the cable. This is affecting the way that the ground rings, okay, in the cable as well as in the LAN itself, okay, in the switch and the router. Which, if you can alter the ringing signature of the switch and router, guess what they have inside them? It's called a power supply. Wait a minute, what's that power supply attached to? The same plug that everything else is plugged into. So I have done experiments where I've taken all of the Ethernet cables out. I've just plugged a pair of these into the switch, headphones on, and within 20 minutes through the headphones, I could hear the ringing signature bleed back into the power conditioner. So they do something. Do they do what everybody claims them? Who the fuck knows? I doubt it. You're just changing the ringing character of the output. That's all. But you are not doing anything to the signal. You're right. We have protocols that prevent that from happening.
because with Ethernet, it's funny because you hear a lot. Well, it's digital
Well,
information.
it's
It's
digital
encoded,
over an analog transmission line. Sure.
right? It's still an analog electrical waveform, right? That's
I
being
mean,
carried.
even
So
fiber optic, even though we're sending it through light, the moment that we decode the light on the other side, guess what? It's analog again, no matter how you look at it. So you're only digital for this, this thing. I was you know that we have a building biologist on the West Coast that we work with, and one of her things that she always says to me is that, I'm affected by fiber optics, and I'm thinking to myself, how? I mean, knowing how low voltage fiber optics is and so forth, how the fuck can that be bothering you? I said, are you sure you're bothered by by the fiber, or are you, by the inverter converting it over, once you switch it over? And she does. I don't think she really knows, but I can't imagine you bothered by the fiber. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's so low voltage. But maybe we
one,
should look. That's what I said to her. I said maybe you should look at a better power supply for your converter ends. Maybe that might
oh
be the
yeah,
answer.
not an El Cheapo
Yeah,
switching.
right. The
Yeah.
problem is on the West Coast, a lot of the buildings are now being wired with fiber, and that's great. But the fiber box that's on the outside of the building is garbage, as you know, and so is their equipment once it enters your house. So you have to do a lot of different things. And when you say, well, you have to change the power supply, sometimes, she's thinking this is something I plug into it. No, it's you got to put something in front of the box, whatever box is in your home physically. You got to put something in front of it. Okay, so if that's a power conditioner or an isolation transformer, because again, that ringing transfer is going from the box out to your electrical line. Don't think it's not, because it is. The smaller and shittier that the switch mode power supply is, the feedback will be much larger on the electrical circuit. So nothing you can do about it. They always say to
Wow.
me, well, how do I put a linear power supply in? Isolation transformer. Solves your problem. You know what I mean?
Wow. One other thing I was going to say, Alan, is that you mentioned earlier, because audiophiles get up in arms about you don't want to color the sound.
Why not?
But it's like when it's recorded, it's colored. I mean, everything's manipulated, right? I mean, and depending on who's recording it, are they trying to go to a truer sound to the instrument? There are those cases,
If you
but
pay attention to the YouTubers the last 2 weeks, right? Everyone is everyone is putting on a show about, is it really from the master tape? These AAA cut guys, and you say, well, nothing is cut from the master tape, right? Nobody you Half the time studio mixes are unlistenable. That's why you send it out to a mastering engineer for him to go and EQ it and so forth. But once he goes and does that, there is a different copy for the United States than there is for Great Britain, than there is for Germany, than there is for Japan. And it goes on and on and on. Every country gets a different copy of something else. So it's like looking at Beatles albums, right? If you listen to the original Beatles releases, they were all in mono. Everybody likes them. They're sought after. On the other hand, when they came out in the United States, they were sort of in stereo. They were just wide band, but they were sort of in stereo. So when I say I want to use the original master tape, which one are you looking at?
hmm,
Very simple. Do you go with the stereo one, which Capitol released, or do you go with the one that EMI released? EMI, obviously, because it's the original, but is that what so and so want to use? So there's an argument these days about going on about what do you consider the master tape. I told you there's an Italian company that's putting out these master tapes for like $1,000, and you say, well, what makes it a master tape? Where did you get the master from? I don't care what anybody says. You will never get a carbon copy of the master tape. You'll get a carbon copy of maybe the possible best variation of the master tape. Let's talk sense. So they say, well, we send them into Sony, and Sony gives us a copy of the master. And I'll be honest with you, I've never known Sony to give a copy of the master to anything. Sony has, in their entire music history, has gone out of their way to make sure that they have controlled what leaves the vault. Period. You never get a car. I don't care. You just don't get one. You may get a best off. Maybe it's a copy of a copy of a copy. And that's where we're talking about coloration, right? So we copied it, we used Studer, then we copied it, then we used something else, and then we copied it, we used something else. It's like the debate of digital in music playback. I deliberately went and I found these clips on YouTube talking about the introduction of the CD back in 82, 83. And in there's the Philips machine that everybody used back then for digital editing. And the argument is that, well, MoFi, well, digital editing, which is all that MoFi really did. Yeah, they captured. That's digital editing, right? You go and you capture it, you do your manipulation to it, and then you push it over, to the lathe. you can trace digital editing machines that Philips put in recording studios back to '79. That's when they were first introduced to a recording studio. So every fucking album from that moment on has been recast some form of digital editing. I don't care what they tell you. Oh, it's triple bullshit. Okay, if it's pre 1979, yes, it's triple A cut. But if the reissue is 79 or above, by 82 they were pretty common usage. Okay, to use in a studio. I mean, I was hanging out at the power station in '83ish, and they had several of them. They had 5 rooms right at the time, and 3 of them had a digital editing machine in them. It's 1983. So I feel really bad for Jim Davis. He got such a bad rap with all that nonsense, the DSD gate shit. But again, the guys have been out there arguing over what's the master tape. Every freaking master tape is different from the other for one reason or another. So when you're doing a reissue, you're just really trying to find the best sounding that you can get your hands on today. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be. Ask Steve Hoffman how many times that, you know, do I do a flat transfer, which is what the overall goal is, or do I have to go and tweak it here or there? Right? We just listened to ZZ Top, right, a couple weeks ago, and Matty did 80% of the album. He was able to go straight flat transfer, and he had 2 tracks he had to go and fuck with. Not a lot, but he had to take, he had to notch it down a little bit. One had a notch down, one he had a notch up, and so you have to do something or other. But again, you're getting a variation of the master tape, which is not the same variation that Rhino released just 2 years ago at Tres Hombres, right? That's more smothered sounding. It's darker sounding. It's softer sounding on the bottom end, and you didn't get that with Matt's. But again, 80% of what he did is flat. One of the things that we used to talk about all the time when it came to the gold CDs and so forth, if you listen to all the MoFi gold CDs that came out in the '90s, every single one of them are a flat transfer. They didn't do nothing to them. Audiophiles hate. They'll go and say, "I don't like this. I don't like this." They're all flat transfers. So you're saying you don't like the master tape? I'm sorry. You're not getting the EQ tape. You're getting, most times the Dolby A tape or whatever, for MoFis. Fine. So yeah, they tell you that they don't like colorations, but it's like I always say, do you want to listen to something that this company does or that company does? Where is your stereo system in your room and your hearing? Do you want to nudge it 1 notch to the warm side, or do you want to nudge it 1 notch to the bright side? And that's going to tell you who you favor. It's not because they're better; they just are able to sing better in your room. I like Kevin Gray stuff. Why? Because he notches it 1 notch to the brighter side. I personally like Steve Hoffman stuff. Why? Because he notches it 1 notch to the warmer side, no matter what he does. No different than power cords, fuses, cables, component selection. How do you want to color your room? Don't buy it by, don't read, some reviewer's opinion of it, because his room is not your room. His ears are not your ears. And half the time he's getting them for free and you have to pay for it. So,
Yeah. Because from the get-go, nobody's tracking and going, I'm just using the raw mic feed and we're not touching anything. So
how many times do you go and you walk into a studio and they're trying to figure out how to mic a snare drum, right? And if you ever watch the guys set the room up, they could be in there for hours just trying to get the right texture, the right sound, the right ring, right? Do I want the whack to sound like tang or do I want it to sound like tut? And they'll go back and forth and agonize over this for hours on end. Half the time, you only get about 85% of what you wanted to captured. Everything else has got to go through an EQ stage, one way, shape, or form. You know, so it's a kooky. I mean, you used to watch it because you were able to sit down in Omni and watch from behind the scenes to go and see how all this stuff is done, and that's a great experience because a lot of people, they sit back and they listen to this so and so on the radio or whatever, or they stream it off a title, and they don't understand all the work that went into where it started at to get it to here. But at the same time, because you heard how it was started, you know where all the compression had to go in because you have to go and compress it in order to go and get the title to be able to stream it. You have to have certain levels of compression. It's just no different than the old days of FM where we used to have to compress it in order for the airwaves, and so forth. I mean, how would you rather listen to, a compressed or uncompressed?
Uh, oh, as far as from the studio,
Yeah,
compressed.
you rather listen to a compressed?
Well, I guess in certain cases, uncompressed from the get go. If the
Yeah.
compression's done tastefully in the circumstance, but
Now, out of 10 pop albums that are released, how much is a compression ever done tastefully?
never,
Never, right?
like 0.1%.
That's right. So you don't really get it's like, ugh. Yeah, it's a rarity that stuff works. That's why the audiophile reissues are so popular. Because a lot of them nowadays will take the compression off, or if there is any, it's so little. It's beautiful. I love the fact that they were taking it off. But hey, let's do it again. Hey, here we go. There we go. Freaking camera! I can't get it to stop doing that. But yeah, I don't know. It's nice to see that stuff end. I was
Yeah.
speaking in the music industry last night. I'm scrolling through things and I find this show on 70s groupies of all things. And I'm going, yeah, I know that one by name. I know that one. I know that one personally. I know this one. Oh my God. Some of this shit, man. Some of the shit your father's generation was involved in. Oh my goodness. No, not your father. Not your father. Oh my God. Too much drugs, my friends. Too much drugs. We're talking about Sunset Strip girls, so we're not talking about.
Oh gosh.
That's a whole nother story in itself. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Plastic
Where did we went to? I went with you to L.A. Was it the Sunset Grill?
I took Dave one year out to Los Angeles, and now the Rainbow.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And whenever I'm in Los Angeles, because you always fly in early in the morning, coming in from our location, hotel rooms are not generally available yet. So I always hit the Rainbow, out of LAX, and just waste some time, get a couple drinks, and eat. But yeah, I mean, the girls are always nice out there. It's just, and don't get the waitresses confused with the groupie scene, but the groupie scene in the '70s and the '80s out there it's insane. I first time I ever went out there was '88. I went out for with MTV, and that was just they were like, there had to be like 1,000 to 1. That was the ratio of women, and they just didn't care. They just. But anyway, yeah, Rainbow's always nice. I mean, that's where everybody goes. Who did we see when we're out there? Ben Stein, right? He was sneaking through. He was going upstairs. So anybody knows anything about the upstairs at the Rainbow? That's where you go to buy whatever you're going to buy. You know what I mean? I didn't want to take Dave upstairs. I can't get up there
Right.
without an invite anyway. But um,
We had a good burger.
we had
We
a
sat
good
on the
burger, yeah.
patio.
But yeah, yeah, upstairs is where that's where anything goes. Up there, nobody cares. Nobody looks. The cops will know about it. Nobody gives a shit. You know, it's L.A. You
Now,
know,
on that subject, were there any good studios out there,
well,
in your opinion?
in Los Angeles, um, I mean, if you went out to like Studio City, there was a lot of good studios out there. You know, Sound City is a prime example of that. That's where Fleetwood Mac recorded a lot of stuff. You know, it's with everybody else. But nowadays, everything is really more of a mastering studio out there. The main studios have left. You know, there's been an exodus out of California. I mean, not just we were talking the other day that Paramount's picking up and leaving, and they're now going to be part of the waterfront project in Nashville. The Ellises are going to get involved in that. So yeah, you have the one which is that's Oracle, right? That's across they're putting the bridge in and so forth,
Yeah.
and then you're going to have Paramount that's on the other side of that now. So within the next, let's say 5 years, let's say they break ground in 5 years, um, that's going to be a lot of jobs they bring. So all if they can get more of the housing community in, they got to get that internal infrastructure. You guys have a housing shortage, so you got to get that internal structure in. But once they do, boy, that's going to be cool. But that think about it. That's Warner Brothers, that falls under Paramount. So that's Warner Brothers Audio. That's Warner Brothers Sound and all that stuff. That's coming to Nashville. I mean, they're there now, but now they're going to have a presence. Where right now it's an office space.
Wow.
You know,
They're gonna need some fuses.
they're going to need a lot of fuses. Absolutely. Hey, listen, he was out there. He's not too far out. If they're on the Vanderbilt, he's not that far, outside of Nashville. So I'm sure he's pumping the fuses out there. Why do you think he's there? Let's talk sense. He's there to move product.
That's great.
Well, I think once the guys like Bernie Grunman finally pass on and stuff like that, I think that's the end of the mastering industry in California. You know, Kevin's still doing, everyone says, well, Coherent. Well, Coherent is in Kevin's house, so he'll stay there because he's just, he's like the Energizer Bunny. He's constantly working. I don't think he can stay off. But the other guys that have been doing it 50, 60 years, once they go, there's really not a lot of guys that can backfill them, right? Everyone says, well, Chris Bellman. Chris is really good, but he's no Bernie Grunman. Bernie just has a feel and a touch like nothing I've ever heard before, and it doesn't matter if we're listening to you know Michael Jackson's Thriller, which he was the mastering engineer on, or we're listening to something more postmodern that he's doing today. He just has a feel that a lot of engineers don't have, and he has an understanding and a working around it, where a lot of other guys are more mechanical, and he's not mechanical. And I was watching a piece on Cole Caperton. I put a video out the other day, and he's talking about how he's run out of talent, and you sit back and say, well, talent it's perceived two different ways. A lot of guys that are in the industry that get more notoriety than some of the other ones that have more talent, right? They get notoriety because they have a little talent, and they just happen to be in Los Angeles. They just happen to work for Capitol, and they're really good people persons, right? Like me, I'm very talented in what I do. I'm not a people person. I hate people. I don't want to be around people. I don't want to work with people. I'm not a people person. So I will always be in the background no matter how you look at it. And that's okay, you know. But in comparison to like the Al Schmitz of the time, Al was more of a people person. He got along with everybody, you know. Colt's not like that. So you will always, you can have the talent, but doesn't necessarily mean you're able to leap forward where you get the notoriety of having the talent. And I think he's starting to get frustrated with that, you know, and that's a shame. He spent a lot of money converting his place over to Dolby Atmos, and you know what that costs, you know, to go and pull all that in. And it's all focal stuff too, right? It's trio 11s and with the solos and all that type of stuff. And that's an expense. That probably cost them 150,000, 250,000 to put all that stuff in. You know, and you know you're not whipping $250,000 out at one shot, so it's all being leased and so forth over X amount of years. You know how the recording studio goes. You go to Sweetwater. I have to put it on six easy payments over 6 months. But if you're a recording studio, a lot of times they'll go and put you up with a multi-year. I think it's 3 years, right? So you get a multi-year contract with them to go and pay it off. But if it's 250,000, you got to generate hump, you know, and hustle and to get to make the 250. Um, and it's just I, th- I just think what we're seeing today in the industry is that you got a lot of not so much. That's why I asked you, do you prefer compression versus non-compression, right? Because if you listen to what the 8 writers are producing in California for top 40 nonsense, right? Your Taylor Swifts of the world. It's all the music itself is crap. You know, it's all bubblegum. It's all crap. It's all literally the same fucking song each time. And but when you listen to the work that's done on it, you know, it's well, we're only doing it so it's played back on title. Well, title is playing shit back at 320 kilobytes per second. You know, when it comes to streaming it back, so they compress the living shit out of it. So now even though you're saying, well, it's a 24-bit file, but it's not really a 24-bit. It's 24-bit file that's containered inside of an 8-bit package, right? Yeah, it's like the argument we talk about with Sirius XM, right? When Sirius XMs first started, I think they were like 8 or 9 bits that they're doing. Well, now if you can get 2 bits out of a channel, that's a lot. They have so much compressed now in such a small space that you get no sound quality whatsoever, and they have to pay for that. That's a joke.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
rather put the
I answered that one wrong. I thought we were talking about studio compression for a second earlier.
no the overall packaging, but
Yeah,
I much rather
you don't want compressed anything, compressed audio, compressed video. That goes with
no.
the streaming
I mean,
everything. You can listen over a streaming service and use a good DVD or Blu-ray, and it's a
it's
different ball
superior,
game.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, think about when it comes to audio and video compression, right? In video, video compression is easy to really see, right? You get the blotch noise and so forth. Well, that blotch noise exists in your audio. You just can't physically see it, but it's there though, and you hear it in all these different clips. You know, it's clippings. Right? That's why they always everything's unity gain, right? Let's max out all the freaking levels because it hides all of the crap that they can't get done. So if they jack it up and everything is now clipped at 2 dBs, okay, over zero, um, you can't hear any of the flubs. And I think that's the piss poor thing that we learned from Rick Rubin's, Californication. If you go and just smash it all up there, right, where the levels are completely smashed across the board, you can't hear where any of the screw ups are. But when you listen to that album, the demo of that album, the original studio masters before it went out to be smashed, there is so much dynamic range in there, and the vocal reproduction, and it's I can't imagine why they didn't release it like that. It's gorgeous sounding, but there is a ridiculous period of time where it just didn't matter how everything sounded. They just smashed the levels, and that was acceptable, because it's the MP3 generation. Well, now the MP3 generation wants to buy a vinyl album because they think, well, it's tangible, you know, not realizing that they're probably only getting about 40% of the sound quality of what the MP3 was really able to get. But the vinyl vibrates differently, so it sounds warmer. But you got to know it, I'm not sure if they're into vinyl because they're into vinyl, or they're into vinyl because it's a fad. So and so says vibe, but might just released my album on vinyl. I mean, one of that types of deals, and you won't know until you take a look at sales numbers and so forth. And that was one of the things I was talking about. When you weren't on, I was going over with CD sale numbers for last year, and they were saying, well, CD sales are up 16%. Well, if you look over, year over year, you know, those numbers don't include everything, right? So they only include new releases. So reissues are not part of those numbers. That's that's something else. And so it's great to say, well, vinyl's up 2%, and CD sales are up 16% for the first half of this year. But reissues, on the other hand, are up almost three times that, but they don't get counted in. Why? Because it's old music, you know, which is a shame. I've gone somewhere totally else on this conversation. Where I was supposed to go. Oops. I don't care. I don't
Yeah,
care.
the next episode will be calling out the fake vinyl lovers.
Yeah, I'll tell you. I get a kick out of listening to these YouTubers, right? Because they go, well, I got the OG, and then I got this, and I got that, and was it manufactured back in the day by Bob Ludwig? If it was, you got a pretty decent copy, right? Um, if it was mastered by somebody else, it's who knows. It's like pressing vinyl today, right? If we're looking at Fidelity Records, they've been doing pretty decent work, right? Which Fidelity Records is pretty much a multi between RTI and MoFi. They created their own label, but it's still the RTI guys running the show. Um, Optimal, again, over in Germany, put out a really good product. Memphis, on the other hand, if you ever hear anything pressed on Memphis, it's some of the worst vinyl you ever heard in your freaking life. It's so noisy and compressed. They seem to use a compressed digital file, and it's just so noisy. But you know, it's vinyl's not everything it's cracked out to be, kiddies.
It can be done poorly
Oh,
as well.
absolutely, can be done poorly. And let's not forget Snap, Crackle, and Pop while you're trying to listen to. God forbid you got dust.
Right.
I mean, one of the things you see with a lot of these kids is that they figured out the bargain bins. When they go into a lot of the record shops, and that's great. But they haven't spent the money to go and get like a degritter or something like that to go and clean the album, and just putting a little bit of a brush over top of it. Snap, crackle, snap, crackle, snap, crackle. That's the only thing I can't stand about vinyl. I didn't miss that when we made the switch over to digital, even though digital sounded like crap in the beginning. I didn't miss that snap crackle. It just made cassettes sound better for that small period of time.
Right.
Until they became metallic, But oh God. I can't believe they're bringing cassette tapes back. I just can't get over that. No machines, and yet we're releasing cassette tapes. Why would we do that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Where are the players? Where's the playback?
Outside of these cheap little tiny Chinese numbers, there really isn't any. There's one company that's making the tape mechanism in the heads, and it's just a two head setup, and I think TIAC and Tascam, which is the same company, they're using it. Okay, but if you look at both of them, they're not all analog; they're digital. So they're probably using some kind of digital Dolby NR, system built into. You have to because crappy heads, man, they hiss like a bear. That
Wow.
was always the sucky. I remember that from. Are you familiar with cassette tapes?
Yeah, I had them growing up.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what I
so you
first
you
listened to music on.
so you remember the hiss then that used to come off of them.
Oh yeah,
So we used to have to use the Dolby NR, which it's suck only a portion of it out. You still heard the hiss.
yeah.
Yeah,
Because I remember trying to record stuff off of local FM radio.
we all
They
did.
did
Yeah.
the countdowns, and then just that it was even worse than what you would buy. You'd
I
get that tape hiss
I knew
on
I
the
knew this
record.
kid. I knew this kid growing up, and remember the old portable, units, with the speaker built into it. He would go and record the television theme tracks. So BJ the Bear. I don't know if you know what that is or not, but he would, he would do all these different Dukes of Hazard. Well, Cooter, but that type of shit. I was like, what are you doing? And he'd be outside listening to him all day. It's just a good old boy. It's like, holy shit. Oh man, I miss those days.
Oh, that's great.
That's fucking funny. I miss those days. Christ almighty. I used to drive
Oh
I
wow.
used to drive my neighbors nuts when I used to work for Megaforce. I used to get certain things before they were released, and my job was to go outside in the neighborhood and blast them to get all the local kids interested in what it was. John had a real interesting distribution sense, but oh my god, I'd be outside to crank it up to 11, that type of deal. Kill them all, yeah. Oh god, I was driving my neighbors nuts.
Oh.
Hey, shit happens. You'll live. I don't live there anymore. You'll live. Oh god,
Oh.
yeah, I miss those days. But yeah, it was just crappy stuff. But maybe if we would have had some conditioning fuses, maybe it wouldn't have been so crappy.
Yeah, exactly. That's
You know,
see.
that's
Just
the weird thing. You look at the tape machines that are out right now, right? Uh, they're not grounding them still. Isn't that interesting?
oh wow.
So they must really be Chinese made.
Wow. Jeez.
Who was I telling this to? Somebody asked me the other day um, about electronics and the difference between Japanese and U.S. He said, why is most Japanese components not three wire grounded? And I said, well, that's because most Japanese components, just like the Chinese, is that even though their voltage is 100, ours is 120, and European is 230. Um, the component itself is probably around 75, and they go and they sample back. And when you float all of that, eventually the DC leakage has got to go somewhere, right? So in the Chinese portion, they literally DC leak it on the neutral, or it'll dump it to chassis, which is why Chinese gear hums all the fucking time, and where the Japanese will actually put it back into the transformer and break it down that way. But trying to explain that to them, that we do it because we don't have to worry about the DC leakage because the way that we designed the circuit here is, crazy. But
Wow.
why doesn't it do that? Well, because at the end of the day, it samples it back. Where the Chinese, on the other hand, have so much voltage. See, that's the difference. The Chinese give you the max voltage, and then they bleed it back, whatever you're not using, back through your resistor. Where the Japanese downsample it. So, if you ever wanted to know why it doesn't have, that's why it doesn't have. And for the rest of you, don't give a shit. I don't care. We're just bringing it up in conversation here because it's there. It is what it is. Anything else going on this week?
Alan's giving out the free tips.
I'm always giving out free tips,
Free
guys.
tips. Jeez.
Is there anything else going on this week?
Not that I can think of. I saw a little bit of audio news. This is news to me that Playback Designs has an amplifier now.
Yes,
maybe they always have. And it's a really budget friendly option at 94,000 euros. So,
so 94,000 euros. What is that? 150? Yeah, it's about what, 110? 110? Right? It's 15. It's $1.15 to the dollar. So yeah. That's insane.
Wow.
That is insane. Yeah. Hey, listen. If you can afford it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're going to sell any here, but if you can afford it.
Right.
I don't understand these companies, man. It just, in the economy that we're in, you think about all the people that actually are the ones purchasing this stuff. I mean, you and I both know we can talk to somebody that's, let's say they make 125,000 annually. They'll go and mortgage their house in order to go and get a piece of stereo gear, right? They'll take a second mortgage out or whatever. But when you hit the millionaire club, they don't ever seem to dip into their wallet. How much money can you give me off on this before I go and buy it? They'll sit there and negotiate. But everybody else, oh my God, 115,000, I could swing that. I could swing that on my Amex.
Yeah.
For 30 days. Sure.
Yeah, everybody else I know in that bracket that gets into it tries to get everything used as much as they can. It's all demo gear. It's always that. And the people I've seen that will drop some coin are people that they're not audiophiles at all. They don't know anything about it. And it's just like, give me something really good. And then they just trust your judgment. And you go, why can't every audiophile customer be like this?
But hey, you can do really good systems for $5,000, or you can do really good systems for $500,000. And a lot of times, the difference between the two of them is not as big as you really think. Outside of the speakers, it's really not that big of a difference. And so yeah, it's some people you just see them coming, and you can absolutely give them that recommendation, but I don't know.
Yeah, if you get the room and the speakers, and then you can go from there.
Like, let me ask you, what are you using these days?
The Emerald Physics.
Yeah.
And I've got a pair of Event ASP8 studio monitors that I like. Okay. That's a different kind of sound. It's a soft dome, kind of like Dyne Audio, but a little more second order harmonics than the Dyne Audio tweeters.
Right.
And then I like headphones too, so I'll use I like the Zodiac Gold, the Antelope, and I like that little Korg DS100 DAC for headphone listening too. It's portable.
Yeah, right.
So just hook up the laptop to that, and then tweak the power. Have the power strip tweaked out, and even with the, you can hear the difference on the laptop plugged in versus battery. Of course.
Now this is an audiophile giving you some understanding of what he's doing. Now, quick question. Now let's convert that over to your father, who is a professional musician. Right? What does he listen to things
on? Apple AirPods.
That's right. That is right.
And an old pair of Sony headphones, whatever that flagship, that standard was for a while, the old Sonys. I can't remember which model it was.
When Greg Allman passed away, I know Mike, and they had a list of things that they were offering out to private, that they were going to get rid of from the house, and so they send me the list, and I'm going through everything, and it's all like '70s receivers and all that type of stuff. And I said, "What's this? A pair of Bose 901s." I was started laughing. It was the first generation of them. I was like, I was laughing my ass off, but this is, because this is Greg Allman's stereo system, a pair of Bose 901s, you know. But that's most musicians do not listen to things at 24.96. They don't listen to, expensive stereo gear. That's a shocker if you see that. And if they do have the Macintosh system, 9 times out of 10 they don't know how to use it. Things like that. Uh, they'd rather pick a guitar up and just play, and even that they don't want to do. But well, you know why. But um, it's totally different from the audiophile mindset, right? Where it's if you're the music audiophile, it's music, 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 which is why I brought the groupie thing up before, because it's about the music, 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 and then there's the other side of it where it's the flash and the glam of what the appearance is, and how I can make all my friends drool because it's got diamonds in it and all this other stuff. And there's a scene of the groupie scene that where it wasn't about the music anymore. It was about how do I be part of the lifestyle, and that part of that lifestyle is I gotta go and deal the cocaine, and I gotta deal the smack, and I gotta do, you know, and it's a different type of thing. I was watching this one clip where they were talking about, the Guns N' Roses album, Appetite for Destruction. There's a song on there, Rocky Queen, and I've always heard the story, but I've forgotten about it. And there's if you listen to it, the song, there's a part of the song where there's a woman in the throes of, and I didn't realize that it was Steven Adler's girlfriend, that they went and got drunk and high one evening, Axel and Slash, and brought her to the studio, and while they were being disgusting and and defiling her, they were recording her throes of passion for this song, which is, and that's the other scene of it. It's the glitz, the glam, or it's the music only, or it's the the reasonable listener. And what is the reasonable listener for? They just go to the show and they listen to it on their Pioneer receiver that was manufactured in 1978. And right, I mean that's it.
Well, and in Nashville, you see that with I don't think that's why I don't think the audiophile scene is big, because everybody's trying to make the music.
Right,
They care more about producing it than listening
right.
back. The playbacks just
Well,
for some of the studio guys that
uh,
care some
uh,
about the gear, but they're also more about collecting gear to record with. The next
imagine if you
compressor, the
have to sit
next,
in, if you're sitting in a studio for anywhere from 10 to 15 hours every single day, right? Do you want to go home and listen to more music?
right.
I mean, well, I'm listening to the car. That's because I'm trying to hear what the mix I just went and did doesn't translate through the car, which I don't know why anybody uses that as a medium, but they do. You know, a lot of producers today will tell you, I listen to playback in the car, and I listen to them on my Apple AirBuds, and that's how I judge if the mix is any decent or
Mm,
not. And he said, well, whatever happened to the days of listening to it, over a nice setup, and those days are long gone. That's a shame.
yeah. I don't think the people have the attention span either to
I
like
don't
put
know.
on a record. The concept of just putting on a record and listening to that. You get some of the vinyl folks that will do that, but even some of the audiophiles I met in the past, they wouldn't even sit and listen.
I
They
don't,
just wanted to talk about the gear, and
I
it's not. You
I
know,
don't mind sitting. You know what bothers me when it comes to vinyl? It's 33 versus 45. And I have to get up every fucking 12 minutes and flip the side after two songs. That's annoying. I'm a child of the 70s. I'm used to 33 and a third. I prefer the album that way. If you want to hear the benefit of what 45 can actually do, the only benefit, in all honesty, is that you get a couple extra dBs out of it. Turn your volume up 2 dBs, and you pretty much have matched what a 45 can do. I know a lot of people disagree with me. Well, it's got better clarity. It's got the. I'm not really sure if it is. I mean, that's really the mastering of it. You're comparing this mastering engineer versus that one, and that's not the same thing. But if you really want to know the difference between the same guy mastering a 33 and a 45 on the same material, it's 2 dBs. Just jack it up a little bit. And I much rather flip the album over after 5 songs than after two, because that's annoying. That's my pet peeve when it comes to vinyl. Yeah, it was funny because I was talking to Carrie a couple weeks ago, and she's asking me about vinyl because one of her girlfriends is getting into it. And I said, well, I gave you a turntable, and I send her stuff for the baby every once in a while, and she says, Dad, my friends are not into playing it; they just want to collect it. I said, for what? Well, because it's valuable. I said, no, 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 no. The Beatles yesterday and today, first press is valuable. Taylor Swift is not valuable. Taylor Swift's going to be in the bargain bin in about 8 weeks. You know, what do you? And that's what they're collecting too. And it's what are you doing? Don't get into this because you think it is an investment. It's not. It devalues in price pretty rapidly. Um, it's like buying albums, and the albums are $100 or 100 quarter, $150. I mean, think about in your lifetime, right? How many times am I really going to listen to this album? Am I going to get my $150 out of it? How many times do you buy something and you listen to it once or twice? I do it all the time. You know, I have albums in here I haven't even opened yet. I listen to it
mhm.
once or twice if I'm lucky. I don't got time
Yeah,
to sit there. And then I say, well, I spent $100 and I'm doing it because I want to compare notes to what I have. But at the end of the day, what am I going to reach for? I'm going to put Rune on. I have the same album on Rune. Maybe it's by Steve Hoffman in it, and that's what I'm going to listen to. It's just the convenience. There's more convenience to it, and you have a generation that's my daughter's generation that they're so used to. You're absolutely correct. They do not sit down and listen to the album anymore. It's track flipping. So I listen to this song, and I'm from Chicago, and then I'm listening to this Fleetwood Mac song, and then I'm listening to this Beatles song, and it's basically putting together a soundtrack now instead of just sitting there and saying, well, I'm going to listen to Pet Sounds from start to finish, and hear all the mastery work that's in it. They're not interested in that, you know. And they all fall. One of the things that you find out with the young kids nowadays is that they're so influenced by what so and so says, like maybe like Jack White or whatever. And nothing personal. Jack White is a disgusting human being. You ever listen to him talk? Uh, you know, um, but they're all kind of turned on by, well, he thinks it's this, or she thinks it's that, or it's a mess. You know.
yeah. The days of putting on an album and listening to it are
Yeah, I
seemingly
was I
gone.
was watching this Jesse Wooders clip. They went to Belmar in Jersey to go and interview the idiots, freshman college, and you know obviously it's a political show. So they're asking who's the vice president. Not one of them knew. Can you tell me what the Second Amendment is? Not one of them knew. And it's like, holy shit! What do you learn now in school? And you take that they learn absolutely nothing in school these days, and you apply that to what you and I are talking about. It's there is it's just an age block now that there's no physical focus on it. Everything is now in the background. You know, it's mob mentality. Well, Jack White, and that's why I did it, and that's why I'm thinking of doing it. That's why I'm collecting. Kerry told me they're buying 50, 60 albums, right? They don't even own a turntable. What the fuck for would you do that? You know, it's like my son-in-law who buys comic books for a financial investment. I mean, Jesus Christ. You know how many Superman number ones there are that are worth anything? One, and you don't have it. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
kooky.
that's I think that's what they're teaching in schools. Collect vinyl.
Is that what they're teaching them? Collect vinyl. You might
But
lose your
also, while
shirt
you're
from
at
it.
it,
Yeah.
buy a fuse. And actually, I'm just going to plug it. Buy one of Allen's fuses.
Hey,
Why not?
why not? Anyway, getting back to synergistic fuses because that's what this is supposed to be about. I've
Oh,
actually I knowing how to go and implement their stuff into the system. I'm actually very impressed with what they do, and I only got 7 days on them, so I'm pretty pleased with the performance. I know that it'll get us a little bit warmer and nicer and refined over the next 7 days. I kind of know what to anticipate, and I'm going to leave them in there for a while. I paid for them. I might as well enjoy them. And then we're just going to have to see how that next product works. I don't want to say what it is, but it's supposed to be really cool. I'm looking forward to it. You know what I need from you? I need some USB sticks from you.
yeah.
Send me some sticks. Move
Yep.
everything off. Send me some sticks because I'm stacking SACDs and Quadios that are coming in. So I'm going to work
Oh,
on them
wow. Cool.
this week into early next week, and then I'm going to send you one big gigantic stick, and we'll do a big
Nice.
huge show in about 3 weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks, and that'll be kind of cool. But
Cool.
I got two from I got two from Chad Antelope Productions. I got some MoFi stuff that just came in. Um, let's see, and I just got James Gang in Miami. I don't know if you know that album, but that's such a great album. Joe Walsh, such a good
Cool.
album. And there's a lot of stuff, So
Nice.
anyway, boys and girls, what do you want to talk about next week? I got an idea. We brought this up before. Why don't we talk about how to package um, stereo systems without costing a fortune?
Yeah.
Okay, let's find like one or two really nice choice pieces and some speakers and put a package together. We'll do like 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. Does that sound good? Or
Sounds
all right,
good.
all right, boys and girls. I think almost 2 hours of listening to me yap. I think that's enough. So anyway, like and subscribe and please share.
Yeah, and I've run out of coffee, so I'll be
I'm
turning
out of
into a
coffee
pumpkin
too.
soon.
Yeah,
So
I'm out of coffee. So all right, boys and girls, have fun, have a happy, stay safe, will you please? And I'm gonna go buy tickets for Mini Kiss. So that's where I'm going right now. Mini Kiss. Have you ever seen Mini Kiss, Dave?
no.
They're 3 feet high. It's really cool. It's a bunch of dwarfs. All right. All right, boys and girls. Like, subscribe, and share. Take care.